What is up, everybody? Today, on this episode of the One Piece vlog, we'll be doing the Dressrosa review. So, coming off of last week's episode, I made a video on Doflamingo and why I think he's such a terrifying and great villain in One Piece. So, I think that is a good place to start for the beginning of this review, because I really think Doflamingo makes Dressrosa what it is. He's a terrifying villain. He's very quickly become one of my favorite characters in One Piece, and probably one of my favorite villains ever. I think he's terrifying, his ideology is profound, and he has one of the most heartbreaking backstories, which is pretty incredible for the terrible things that he does. For him to still feel sympathetic, I think it's just another example of Oda and the amazing storytelling that Oda uses in One Piece. And then also going off of my Punk Hazard review, one of the things, I gave that arc a 7 out of 10, but it really felt like it was the beginning, like it was part of Dressrosa, like it was the first act, and I still stand by that. I think in context of the Dressrosa arc, you can kind of see the really cool things that Punk Hazard was doing, especially setting up Law to have his backstory that would come up in the future. So maybe Punk Hazard would be like a 7.5 out of 10. I still think it's, as an individual arc, maybe a little bit weaker, but in the context of Dressrosa, I think it fits its purpose really well. And then outside of Doflamingo, because I've talked about him so much, and if you haven't seen my video on him, go check it out here. But the other character that really holds this arc up is Law, and that you really start to see why he is, the second most popular character in One Piece, one of the most popular characters in the entire series. Not only does he have a great design, his power is super unique, but his backstory is one of the saddest things that I've seen in a long time. Like, Oda hasn't really hit us with, like, the super sad backstory on the level of Law's, really since Water 7. I think, obviously, you have in between then Brook and Jinbei, but, really I think the only backstory to kind of rival Robin's for my favorites so far in the series is probably a toss-up with Doflamingo and Law. And the fact that kind of part of Doflamingo's backstory is so connected to Law, I think helps strengthen kind of their connection in this plot, because sometimes when you get to these bigger arcs, one of the issues can be, that so many characters who are like allies of the Straw Hats, but they're not Straw Hats, can sometimes fall a little flat, I think. But Law meets the expectation that all of the Straw Hats have. And so, yeah, he really just, throughout the entirety of this arc, he felt like he was a Straw Hat. I really like how he interacts with the crew. I like how you can see him, now that he's interacting more and more, with the crew, you see his facial expressions. He used to just be so deadpan, and slowly I feel like you start to see him show more emotion and act more like a Straw Hat. And obviously he's not a Straw Hat, they do just have an alliance, but I still really liked that. And I think it's a cool little touch by Oda, in a similar way of how he draws the admirals, and he draws, Sakazuki more realistically than any other character in the series. And you see that again with Fujitora, who is an amazing addition as an admiral. I really like his perspective on the world, and you get that at the end of the arc when, he bows down and apologizes. That's unheard of for someone of this rank, and so to insert him, into the reins, especially with Sakazuki being at, Fleet Admiral, it is a really interesting choice by him as a character to allow Fujitora to be an admiral when it seems like, obviously Fujitora's power is so overpowered, he's so strong. But to see, him kind of have this different perspective on what the world government's role should be versus that of Sakazuki, I think that, you saw them butt heads a little bit at the end of Dressrosa, and how Fujitora wants to take down all of the warlords. That's going to be really interesting moving forward, I think, because it feels like a lot of dominoes are starting to fall, and that's kind of been going on for the course of the story. But now that we're in the new world, things have such bigger consequences that even a side character like Fujitora, his decision could really affect what Luffy and kind of all of the pirates are doing later down the line. If you have another big battle between Fujitora and Sakazuki, another big battle between top ranking members of the Navy. And again, Oda with the backstories. Another backstory that I want to mention is Senor Pink. His backstory, which I had heard about in Eyepatch Wolf's video. I've talked about this quite a lot, that I have watched his 2 videos and I saw, a few things. But his backstory, it's only like a handful of pages, minimal dialogue, and yet it just hits so hard, and it's so believable for a character that's dressed up ridiculously. And they kind of, Oda hints to the mystery, because when you see the backstory with Law and Doflamingo, you see that Senor Pink used to, look like an actual, like, mob boss leader, instead of this, bigger guy who's just dressed as a baby. And it's like, why are all these girls fawning over him? And so his backstory with his wife and his kid, and just showing how it shows how Oda can literally give him 3 pages and only a handful of speech bubbles, and he's gonna make, he can make an infinitely sad backstory. And so I think it was perfect for a side character like Senor Pink, and because Senor Pink really doesn't have that much screen time, and his fight between Frankie, it was probably my favorite side fight between everyone at Dressrosa at the end of the arc. Obviously, I think Doflamingo versus Luffy is incredible. And then kind of the last character that I want to touch on over Dressrosa is Sabo. And we've talked about Sabo on my video on the podcast. Tyler and I talked about, is he the worst character? I mean, we didn't explicitly say that, but really it kind of felt like this was the one big miss that Oda had, is that Sabo was this set up to be this kind of different dimension to Luffy and Ace, and instead he just feels like the reincarnation of Ace. And him getting the flame fruit feels like it's kind of a cop-out, and Oda was like, okay, I killed off Ace in one of the greatest moments in all of One Piece, also probably the saddest moment in all of One Piece. And then it kind of feels like he's backtracking and saying, let's just kind of make up what we lost with Ace with Sabo. And I think the story is a little worse off because of that choice. I think it would have been a little more interesting to see the flame fruit in the hands of someone different, and it really would have punctuated Luffy's failure there, because that's Luffy's lowest moment in the story, and I think it goes a really long way in separating Luffy from so many other shonen protagonists. The fact that he hits this moment, and he hits the low at Sabaody Archipelago, but then he just keeps going down with the death of Ace. And then as he's building himself back up, it's like, okay, I get it. He meets Sabo, and there's the great moment when they're reintroduced, and Luffy sees him again. That moment's awesome, and it's really heartfelt. But then just him getting the flame fruit, I don't know, it would have been interesting to see how Luffy would have reacted if not only could he not save Ace, but then he couldn't even protect his fruit, and he couldn't even protect the power, the essence of Ace. Kind of the one thing he's left behind physically is his power. And obviously it's kind of cool that Sabo gets it, so I kind of go back and forth, because at the end of Dressrosa, you get the moment where he talks about how he's had amnesia, and he has that moment, the flashback of when he freaks out that his brother had died. That moment, even though I was really kind of mixed about my feelings on Sabo, that moment really hit hard. And so I think there's still some potential for Oda to kind of, I think, develop and separate Sabo from Ace even more. I hope he does it, because I think Sabo has a really interesting place in the story as a revolutionary, and kind of seeing more with what's going on with them. I think Sabo could be fleshed out a lot, and I hope Oda does it. I'm curious to see where he's going to be in the story moving forward. He's obviously super strong. For him to just kind of like jokingly compete with Fujitora is kind of really impressive. So I want to see his full strength too, especially with the flame fruit. So I'm pretty mixed on it right now. He's had some cool emotional moments with reuniting with Luffy and his little backstory right there, but I also feel like there was maybe some missed potential. Kind of reminds me of, it's maybe the second time in the story that I really think Oda has kind of missed on a character, and that was with Rob Lucci, who was reintroduced at the end of this arc, and I'm excited. I'm all for it. I hope Rob Lucci becomes an awesome character. He has an awesome design, and they just, I think, kind of missed with him, and so if bringing him back in the fold, I think could be pretty interesting, and him seeing Luffy again maybe one day would be kind of cool. But it feels like those are the two characters, at least for me, that Oda's kind of missed their potential to be some of the best characters in One Piece. Instead, they're just kind of fine. And so, I don't know. What do you guys think of Sabo? Again, I'm kind of mixed on him because I think he's had some good moments, but I still struggle with separating him from Ace. And then I also think Dressrosa, again, the thematic explorations in Dressrosa, continuing with Punk Hazard and Fishman Island before it, where I feel like Oda's really starting to explore some deeper themes. You see the kind of duality of life, and obviously how Doflamingo can become such a terror from going through the exact same events as Corazon, his younger brother, and his younger brother being involved with Sengoku, which also Sengoku and Law have an amazing moment at the end. It was really cool to see Sengoku be like, I can't believe that my only memory of him, the only person who can share kind of his life is a pirate. That moment is really awesome, and it helps categorize Law and his whole relationship with Corazon, and kind of his search for vengeance against Doflamingo, a big driving factor. But you see kind of this duality of how certain events can shape people so drastically. And then you also look on, again, how corruption can function. We've seen more and more of the world and how corrupt it is. You see it with the racism in Fishman Island, and then you see it in Punk Hazard with Caesar, and you see all of these kids' addiction, and how when you give someone an addiction, that can be a way to just keep them under control from like a government perspective. And then you move on to Dressrosa, where they're literally turning people into toys. People who do things maybe against what they want, they turn them into toys, they make their family forget about them, and then they use them for slave labor. And they have the complete difference in the fact that toys can never be in the same house as a human, and vice versa. And so you have this class divide, but it also stems from people not obeying Doflamingo and kind of the government, the king of Dressrosa. So I really found that interesting, and that kind of helped push some of the slower moments of this arc forward. I also think Rebecca and Violet and kind of all the fairies, the little people in the arc were all really interesting. I liked kind of the dynamics of the world. And to talk about one of the criticisms that I've heard about Dressrosa is kind of the pacing of it. A lot of people say it's a little bit too long, and I mean, maybe they get that perspective from the anime, but from the manga, there was maybe 3 or 4 chapters out of the 148 chapters that is this arc or saga that kind of dragged for me. Some of the side fights towards the end might have dragged a little bit, but I also think that might have been just because I was so invested in Doflamingo that I just like wanted to see him fight Luffy, and I obviously so invested in Law and Luffy, of course, and Bellamy, his reintroduction was really cool too. There's just so many things, I feel like I can't even talk about everything that I liked about Dressrosa. As you can tell, it's one of my favorite arcs in the story, so really, it had maybe a few pacing issues, but overall, I didn't think the pace was that bad at all, because I was really invested in this world. And actually, it's compared by characters. I've compared it myself, and I've seen other people compare it to Alabasta, because it feels like Doflamingo, if Crocodile succeeded, if Crocodile got his wish, he would have been what Doflamingo was. And so there is that comparison between Dressrosa and the Alabasta saga. Of course, they both are the second saga, you know, in pre-time skip and post-time skip, but I actually liked Dressrosa quite a bit more than Alabasta. Alabasta, outside of, you know, Vivi, I think was good. Crocodile, it was a good villain at the time, but I don't think is anywhere near Doflamingo, and even after his reintroduction in the Summit War, I still don't think he even really matches Doflamingo and everything that Doflamingo was able to achieve in this arc. So yeah, I think, you know, Alabasta, I think is a really good arc. I think Dressrosa is probably one of the best arcs in One Piece. I loved basically everything about it. One thing that kind of I struggled with a little bit was when they got rid of Sanji and Nami, Brook and Chopper, and they kind of just shipped them off, and Oda was like, I introduced so many characters in this arc, I've got to kind of send you away for a little bit. That was kind of annoying because I kind of wanted to see Sanji do some more. He did have that awesome kind of block against Doflamingo before they went, and I want to see what's going on with him and Big Mom and kind of everything that they've been doing, because I'm sure they've done a ton of things. But yeah, those are kind of my only little negatives. Maybe it dragged a little bit in the middle, but I don't think it was too long. You know, it would be very different if I read it week to week potentially, or if I was watching it in the anime. But I think just kind of reading it all at once, I never kind of felt it was too long at all. And I think the beginning really sweeps you into kind of the middle when you're kind of learning more about the world, because you get there and they have this goal, they have a mission, which helps keep the pace going, I think. And you have all those things with Law, Doflamingo, and Fujitora fight in the first third of the Dressrosa arc. Like, we don't see that all the time in One Piece. Sometimes it takes a little bit for the arcs to get going. So yeah, I really, really liked Dressrosa and pretty much just everything about it. And I'm excited to see the implications on the world. And I kind of talked about this a little bit in my Doflamingo video, the Terror of Doflamingo, that I came out with last week. And it's kind of about Doflamingo wanted like chaos, and he wanted to kind of bring down the world and bring the world to its knees. And with this loss, with him falling, he had positioned himself under all of these powerhouses above him and kind of beneath him. He was kind of a huge string, and pun intended, to hold everything together. And so when he falls, you know, and they talk about it very explicitly, and he has a monologue about it, and they mention that, you know, Luffy and his whole big army that is kind of following him now, but like not really, and I'll talk about that in a second. There's going to be chaos in the world because the powers are truly shifting. And there's been multiple dominoes that have fallen throughout the course of kind of the end of pre-time skip One Piece to now, right? You have everything with Fishman Island. You have the Summit War, of course, which is probably the biggest event, with Whitebeard dying and Blackbeard becoming even more of a powerhouse. But you also have the fall of Enies Lobby, which hints to new things, and the rise of the worst generation. But now with Doflamingo, it feels like everything is it feels like he was holding so much of it together, because Kaido and Big Mom, they didn't need to make any moves because, you know, Doflamingo was still supplying so many things for them, and all of the, you know, smaller pirates around the world, he's supplying so much. So with Doflamingo falling, it opens up an entire world of chaos to happen. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what's going to go on from now and going into Whole Cake Island, and I'm not really sure how that's going to happen, because it seems like they're going to Wano, and Kaido is going to be like the next goal. So we'll see what happens there. And yeah, and also with Luffy on his track to being an emperor, he just got, you know, what, 5,600 soldiers or something like that, who he doesn't directly have, but he also definitely can call up anytime he wants. And he's also probably got Fishman Island on his back, and he also, I mean, Alabasta, I don't know how much that's going to matter, but that's a kingdom that if they had to back a pirate, they're going to back Luffy. So yeah, I think Dressrosa was, you know, again, it's right up there with the Summit War arc. I think maybe some of the pacing issues, that was the one thing that the Summit War arc and saga just didn't have. It just didn't have pacing issues. And this one maybe You know, Dressrosa maybe had a little bit of pacing issues, but Doflamingo I think is by far the best villain I've seen so far in One Piece. I think he blows most of them out of the water, which is a pretty high bar to beat. One of my favorite villains out there. Definitely, probably the only other villain I like more than him so far in Big Shonen. I mean, it's probably Meruem. Again, another comparison to Hunter x Hunter there. So yeah, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10 probably. I would have liked to see more Sanji, but maybe that's just my bias of him being one of my favorite characters. But yeah, so I'm excited to see where we're going with Whole Cake Island, and I'm finally we're getting close. We're in the kind of the last chunk of 2 big arcs really, and then I'll be caught up, which I cannot wait for. So what are your guys' thoughts on Dressrosa? If you have more criticisms of it, you know, did you not like the side characters or as much as I did? Did you think the world wasn't as interesting? How do you compare it to Alabasta? Yeah, I'm just kind of interested in, obviously, you know, if Doflamingo isn't your favorite villain out of the villains we've seen so far, obviously I can't talk about really that much about like Big Mom or anything like that. But kind of what do you guys think of Doflamingo in the hierarchy of villains? And yeah, so hopefully I will see you guys in the next One Piece vlog next Thursday. Make sure to follow me on Twitter if you want to talk any One Piece or anything. Yeah, Dressrosa was an absolute blast. I think it's right up there, neck and neck with Summit War for my favorite arcs, and Doflamingo he's awesome, and I can't wait to see what he does in the story next. I'm sure there's just so many things about Dressrosa that I'm forgetting to talk about because it was a great arc. So yeah, see you guys next Thursday in the next One Piece vlog.